Before we begin the story,
Good morning,
Dirt, the
kindergartners.
Scoop on Soil.
Today, like I
Just want you to
promised, we're
keep
going to
in
be
mind
looking
our
at
objective
this
of this
particular
lesson
story.
is
It's called
to
Dirt,
be able to
the
tell,
Scoop
write,
on
or
Soil.
draw some
It is
important
written
facts
by
about soil.
Natalie M.
Rosinski,
and it's illustrated by Cherie Boyd.
To some of the important
This story,
facts,
Dirt, the
because
Scoop
later
on
we might
Soil,
be asking you
has some
to
very
draw or write
important
about it.
vocabulary or very important words
Dirt,
that I want to
the
share
Scoop
with you
on Soil.
before we start the read on Dirt, the Scoop on Soil.
You notice when I open up the story,
Behind me, I have a chart,
different
and the chart
parts
says
to this story.
layers
This
of
is a table
soil.
of contents. This is
Because
a place
when you're
where we
looking
find
at dirt
certain
or soil,
things
there
that
are
we might
many,
wanna
many
look
different
at.
layers
And for
in
today,
the
we're
soil
probably
itself.
not going to get through
And
the
if you
whole
can
book.
see, there
We're going to
are
read
1,
parts of it.
2,
We will
3,
look
4,
at
5
what dirt is
different
made of.
layers
It's
of
alive.
soil. So I
Keeping
want to start
dirt
with
healthy,
way down here,
depending
rocks
on dirt,
and pebbles.
and maybe some
Rocks and
experiments.
pebbles
We'll
is
see
the
how far
very
we can
bottom
get for today.
of
Otherwise, we'll finish the
this
rest
jar
tomorrow.
here.
So let's
And they
move
go
on
to the very
what
bottom
dirt is
because
made
they're
of.
pretty heavy. They're the heaviest of all of these layers. And next comes sand, and we all know sand if we've been to a beach before or in our
What
sand
is
box.
dirt
We notice
made
it's
of?
kind of like a
Dig
fine
deep.
grain
Unearth some dirt.
of little
Hold
rocks.
it in your hand.
And then we have silt. Silt, that's a new word. Fine sand and earthly materials, and it's actually carried by water. And over
Dirt
here
is
is
a mix
clay.
of different parts of
Not
nature.
exactly the clay that we
Crumbling
play with
rocks,
during center time,
Wiggling
but we
worms
can
and
make
scurry
clay
bugs
with the
actually
material
live
found
dirt.
in soil.
Rotting
And
plants,
it's found in
bones,
the earth,
and
and it's
other
kind of
parts
sticky
are
and
made
wet,
of dirt too.
similar to what we play with during center time. And at the very top, this is a new word. It's
Here's
humus.
a chart very
Humus.
similar to the one
It's
that I
decayed
made.
plants,
It shows
which
you
are
the
kind of like
different
those
layers
dead
of
plants
soil.
and
Soil,
animals,
it's
and it's
another
the very
name for
top
dirt.
layer.
Put
So
some
say it with
soil
me.
into
We
a
have
big
humus,
glass jar and fill it with water.
clay,
You stir it and you
silt,
wait, and you'll see what happens.
sand,
It actually goes to layers.
and rocks and pebbles.
I
And
actually
this
have a
word
little
that you see
example
in
of
the
one
very
we
bottom,
started,
this
and maybe
says
sometime
loom.
later on this
Loom
week
is
we'll try
another
one.
word,
Here are
and
the
it's
different layers
the best
that
type
we had
of
talked
soil.
about on
So
the
it's a
chart.
word that
Humus,
describes a really,
silt,
really good
is
soil
clay
that
on
you
the
buy.
side,
And some of your parents,
sand,
if they
rocks,
garden
and
or if
pebbles.
they plant things, they might go
Rocks
and
and
buy a
pebbles
loom
fall to the
at a
very
place,
bottom
at a
because
hardware
they're the
store, or
heaviest
maybe
of
at a
all the
garden
material.
center. So
A
these
lot
are
of
the
soil
different
is made of
layers
rock.
of soil.
Before
Fun
we
fact,
begin the story, dirt
is
is
so
so
interesting.
interesting.
I just want you
that
to keep in
soil
mind our objective
scientists
of this
study
lesson
dirt
is
all
to be
day
able to
long. Tell, write, or
Can you imagine
draw
having that
some
as your
important
job?
facts about soil. Soil is very important in our environment and to all of
Sand,
us in
silt,
so many
and
different
clay
ways.
are
I want you to
tiny
carefully
pieces of
listen
rock
to
that
some of
make
the
up
important
soil.
facts.
The
Because
layer
later
on
we might be
top of
asking
the
you
rocks
to draw
and
or write
pebbles
about it.
is sand.
And notice how her picture, she's
Good morning,
at the beach.
kindergartners.
Another
Today,
fact
like
at
I
the bottom,
promised, we're
use
going to
a
be looking at
magnifying
this
glass
particular
to see the
story.
rainbow
It's
colors
called
hidden
Dirt,
in sand.
the Scoop
Each
on
grain
Soil.
has its own
It is
color.
written by
There's black, there's tan,
Natalie
there's gray,
M.
red, green,
Rosinski,
or
and it's
purple.
illustrated by
Grains
Cherie
of sand
Boyd.
don't really fit
This
together.
story, Dirt, the Scoop
Water
on
runs
Soil,
through quickly.
has some
the
very
spaces
important
between them.
vocabulary
That's why
or very
sand is
important
so
words
dry,
that I want to
and
share
why
with you
sandcastles
before we start the read
crumble
on
so
Dirt,
easily
the
when
Scoop
waves
on
wash
Soil.
over them.
Behind me, I have a chart, and the chart says layers of soil. Because
Silt
when you're
is
looking
like
at
sand,
dirt or
only
soil, there are
silt
many,
grains
many
are
different
much
layers
smaller.
in the soil itself.
Grains of
And
silt
if you can
fit
see, there
more
are
closely
1,
together
2,
and
3,
hold
4,
more
5
water.
different
Silt
layers
makes up the layer on
of
top
soil.
of the sand.
So I want to
You
start
see
with
that on
way
the
down
display
here.
right here.
Rocks and
Soft,
pebbles.
sticky
Rocks
clay
and pebbles is the
has
very bottom
even smaller grains than
of
silt.
this jar
You need a
here.
microscope
And they go to the
see
very
grains of
bottom because
clay.
they're pretty heavy.
Clay
They're the
is
heaviest of
almost like
all of these
powder.
layers.
Clay is what
And
made
next
the
comes
water
sand,
in
and we
your
all know
jar
sand if we've been to
turn
a beach
little
before
cloudy.
or in
And
our
over
sand
here,
box.
you'll notice
We notice
it's
it's kind of like a
fact,
fine
a little
grain
fact to know about
of little
clay.
rocks.
Clay
And then we
can
have
be red,
silt.
yellow, white,
Silt,
tan,
that's a new word.
gray, black, or
Fine
blue.
sand and earthly
use clay to mold
materials, and it's
beautiful
actually
plates
carried by
and bowls.
water.
And we've actually
And
used
over
clay
here
in the
is
classroom
clay.
to make
Not
different
exactly
things
the clay
and
that we
animals.
play
I
with
remember
during
some
center
classrooms
time,
made the three
but
little
we
pigs.
can make clay with the material found in soil. And it's found in the earth, and it's
You
kind
might
of sticky
see
and
flecks
wet.
floating on
similar to
top
what
of
we
the
play
cloudy
with,
water.
during
That's the
center
dark
time.
and gooey
And at the
part
very
of the
top,
soil
this is
called
a
the
new word.
humus.
It's
Humus is
Humus.
made from rotting plants,
Humus.
leaves,
It's
wood,
decayed
and
plants,
other
which are
animal
kind of like
matter.
those dead
And
plants
actually, if you look
and
closely
animals,
at mine,
and it's the very top layer.
you can actually
So
see
say it
the
with me. We
floating
have humus,
particles at the bottom of
clay,
the jar, and that is the rotting
silt,
plants. And I can see it because I'm
sand,
really close to it.
and
Sticky
rocks
humus
and
held
pebbles.
together.
And this word that you
can
see
see
in the
over
very
here.
bottom, this says loam.
Sticky
Loam
humus
is another
helps hold
word,
the rocky parts of
and
soil
it's
together.
the best
Humus
type
is
of
rich
soil.
in
So it's
food
a word
plants
that
need
describes
to
a
grow
really,
green
really
and
good soil
tall.
that you buy. And some of your parents, if they garden or if they plant things, they might
We'll do
go
a
and
couple
buy
more
a
pages
loom
for today,
at a
and we'll
place,
finish
at a
off
hardware
tomorrow.
store, or maybe at a
It's
garden
alive.
center.
Another
So these
section
are
of
the
the
different layers of
book,
soil.
Dirt, the scoop on
Dirt,
soil.
The
There are
Scoop on
millions of
Soil.
creatures that live in
Written
soil.
by
There are
Natalie
beetles and
Brzezinski
sow
and
bugs,
illustrated
millipedes, and wiggly
by
worms that
Cherie
crawl
Boyd.
through the dirt. Other creatures are so small that you can't see them.
Dirt.
These
The
soil
Scoop on
creatures,
Soil.
they
Let's
are
see what
called
the scoop is on soil.
decomposers. Decomposers actually make up humus. They eat
If you
dead
notice in
plants
this book,
and they leave
it
droppings.
is
The droppings
a
are
book
like
with
vitamins
many
for the
different
plants that grow
parts
in
to it.
soil.
We call this
I'll give you
a
one
table
more
of
fact,
contents.
fun fact for
The
today.
table of contents
As
is made up
plants
of
grow
all
in
these
soil,
different parts
They
that we're going
use
to
up
find
the
in
food
this story,
in humus.
Dirt, the Scoop on
Decomposers
Soil.
put
For
more
today,
food
we may
back
only get
into
through
the humus.
some
So we're
of
going to
these
go back and
parts.
review
And if we don't
our
get through
chart
the whole
for
thing,
today.
we'll finish the rest
We
tomorrow.
know that
But for today,
soil
we're gonna
is
focus
made
on
up
the
of
first
different
part,
layers.
which is what is
We have
dirt
the
made
rocks
of?
and pebbles. They're the
It's
heaviest. They go
alive,
all the way to the bottom.
Keeping dirt
We
healthy.
have the sand, which is the
depending
tiniest
on
grains
dirt,
of small
a
broken
few
pieces of
experiments,
rock. And we find
and some of the other
sand at
parts
the
that we
beach or
might
at our
get
sand
to would
table
be
in
fast
school.
facts. And then I'll
Silt
show you
is
what a
the fine
glossary
materials.
is. And a glossary
They're
is a place
earthy
where we're going to find
materials,
words
and they're carried
and
by
the meaning
water.
of those
And
words.
then we have the clay. We know we've also been able to mold and manipulate the clay at school. It's sticky and wet. And the humus part, those are the
What
dead,
is dirt
decaying
made of?
plants at the
Dig
very
deep,
top. They float.
Unearth some
So
dirt.
you're going to remember these
Hold it
words:
in your
clay,
hand.
humus, silt, sand, and silt.
Dirt
And remember
is a mix
loam.
of
Loam
different
is the
parts
best
of
kind of
nature.
soil you can buy for
Crumbling
planting.
rock
So
make up dirt. Wiggling worms and scurry bugs live in the dirt. Rotting plants and bones are part of dirt too. Soil is another word for dirt. If you put some soil into a big glass jar and fill it with water and stir it up and then wait a little while, you will notice that the soil will separate into layers, just like the chart that I showed you and the example that I had in my jar. Rocks and pebbles fall to the bottom because they're the heaviest. A lot of soil that we see outside is actually made of rock. Sand, silt, and clay are the tiny pieces of rock that make up soil. The layer on top of the rocks and pebble is sand, and that is right over here, sand. And if you look into a magnifying glass, you might be able to see rainbow colors hidden in the sand. Each grain has its own color: black, tan, gray, red, green, or even purple. Grains of sand fit closely together. Water runs quickly through the spaces between them. That's why sand is so dry, and why when we make sand castles, they crumble so fast. And waves sometimes come and they wash them over. Silt is like sand, only silt's grains are much smaller. Grains of silt fits more closely together and holds more water. Silt makes up the layer on top of the sand. The soft, sticky clay has even smaller grains than silt. You might even need a microscope to see grains of clay. Clay is almost like powder. Clay is what made the water in your jar turn cloudy. A little fun fact over here: clay can be red, yellow, white, tan, gray, black, or blue. People use clay to mold beautiful plates and bowls. And I'm noticing here in her hand, she must have made this pot right here. And sometimes in school we use clay to create little sculptures or buildings or even little animals. You might see flecks floating on top of the cloudy water. That's the dark and gooey part of soil called humus. Humus is made from rotting plants, leaves, wood, and other animal matter. And I showed you that in my example that I started in my own home, where on the very top there were some dead parts of leaves and trees and things. Sticky humus helps hold the rocky parts of soil together. Humus is rich with food that helps plants grow. It's alive! There are millions of creatures that live in soil. There are beetles, sow bugs, millipedes, and worms that crawl through the dirt. Other creatures are so small that you can't see them. These soil creatures, those are called decomposers. And if you get a chance and you're in your yard and you have a little shovel or something to scoop with, you could even dig to see what you would find underneath the soil. Decomposers make humus. They eat dry, dead plants and they leave droppings. The droppings are like vitamins or food for the plants and that grow in the soil. A little fun fact, here's another fun fact right here. As plants grow in soil, they use up the food and humus. Decomposers put more food back into the humus. Animals can make soil better for plants in another way. Squiggling worms, trailing sand, snails, slithering snakes, and burrowing rabbits actually help loosen the soil as they crawl through it. They make these holes in the soil and it lets the air and water through and it reaches the roots of plants and it helps them grow. Another fun fact down here. After it rains, you can see worms wiggling around along the rainwater when it's filled up the empty spaces in the soil. The worms have to crawl out to find air to breathe, so when it rains a lot, they've got to find somewhere to go. I'm going to stop right there for today, and tomorrow we're going to go on and we're going to read the rest of the story, Dirt, the Scoop on Soil.